Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. Are you ready? This is your host, Laura Aisha. Let's do this. What's happening, everyone? This is your host, Miss Laura Aisha, and I got a treat for you today. I am really thrilled to have an award-winning author on the line with us, someone who has just dove into women's anatomy and sensuality and erotic play and practice in such a way that has transformed an entire sector of our experience with sex and life and love and connection to our own bodies and to the world and whoever we dare or dream to connect with. So Sheri Winston, welcome to Ignite Intimacy.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really just thrilled to be chatting with you today.
Absolutely. Well, we just had a really juicy pre-conversation. Usually, before we start the podcast recording, I connect in with my guests, and it was just so beautiful to connect with you. Thank you so much for the powerful space that you held for me and for the juiciness that we're about to create on this episode.
Yeah, I know. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. Okay, cool. So Sheri, what I'd love to, we're going to dive into some pretty powerful topics here, very powerful topics. There's nothing really pretty about them. They're powerful. And there's something that I would say most people can relate to in some way, shape, or form. And so we're going to be doing a deep dive into conversation about boundaries and checking in with ourselves as we're exploring love and intimacy, romance and sexuality. And then we're going to talk about the women's anatomy, and creating more erotic pleasure, and then also being able to express and communicate that to our lovers and partners.
Goody. Just all of my favorite topics.
I know. And so what I'd love to start with is I would love for you to just give us some insight into how did you get into this whole world? Just drop us in. What was kind of the journey that led you into the work that you've been doing?
Well, I actually started out, my first calling was to be a midwife, and that came on when I was just barely 20. And so I spent 25 years really deep in the world of birth and learning about, I became a childbirth educator and a doula, and then a certified nurse midwife and gynecology practitioner, and mostly doing home birth and then birth center birth. So I got to see real natural birth, which is a privilege that not very many people have, the experience of being at births or experiencing having those kinds of births. So I got to see things like ecstatic and even orgasmic births, for example. So I spent all those years really learning how to help women tune in to themselves and to their inner wisdom, which is the best guide there is. And what I could do and what they could do to get deep into their labor trance. Labor is a trance state. And I did not know this through my 20s, but I was actually training myself to have better sex.
That's awesome.
I didn't even get it for 10 years. I was teaching women how to use the tool of their breathing or visualization, sound, all of these wonderful inner tools that we all have. And I didn't realize it, but I was using them in my sex life, and sex was just getting better and better and better for me. And I just thought that was normal. I thought that sex just got better and better for them. And then I had the epiphany where I realized, no, that's actually not the case. I was starting to do, gynecology also at that point, started to have a lot of patients who were not having great sex, so it was not getting better and easier for them. And so I, at that point, started going to sexuality classes, Tantra and Taoist, Native American, and studying, Western science around sexology. And at that point, I thought I was now learning about sex for my own personal sexual advancement. Once I realized that this is stuff you could learn. But lo and behold, all the stuff I was learning in sex world was helping me to be a better midwife, right? I was bringing that back to my
That's
women and helping
amazing.
them birth better,
Yeah. Well, it's
right?
all connected. I mean, we
Exactly.
do all come from
Yeah,
whether you're birthed through a vagina or not, like,
yeah,
we all come from the connection between penis and
yeah.
vagina and
Well, sperm and egg,
a
certainly. Sex,
sperm and
sex
egg.
made
Yeah,
us.
okay, true, true,
Sex
true.
made us.
Yep.
Sex made us, and in fact, labor and arousal are actually the same trance state. And so all of the things that work to help women get into better labor work to help us get more turned on and deeper into our arousal trance. So anyway, short version of the story, I got a little burnt out on the birth thing, as people are wont to do after being on call for 20 something years. And so I stopped going to births, and I was still doing gynecology part-time in it. And I had been teaching. I was always teaching along with what I was doing. So along with midwifing, I was teaching some childbirth classes and some classes I called womancraft classes, and things like menstrual health and things like that, and vaginal ecology. And at that point, so I'd stopped going to births. I was still doing gynecology. And I added a class for women about how to have better orgasms. And it was so much fun. And then all my guy friends wanted to come to the class. I'm like, no, it's just for women. I'm like, but we want to learn how to help our women have more pleasure. And I'm like, well, all right, I can teach you that. I can teach you that. So then I started teaching a class for men about how to pleasure women. And that was so much fun. And then I started teaching a class for everybody about, how to get deeper into your erotic trance. And I realized at that point that was my next calling. That was my next path. And so I was very lucky to be able to, do the, work as a clinician part-time while I grew my business as a holistic sexuality teacher, which I invented that title because it didn't exist.
Wow.
And
That's amazing.
yeah, and then I retired from clinical care, and then I did the teaching, the holistic sexuality teaching for the last probably almost 19 years. I wrote a couple of books along the way as well, and here I am now, kind of sitting with where's it going now? What's happening next? Yeah.
It's what's so fascinating is, and first of all, I just want to clean this up with our listeners because I totally misspoke about how humans are created, and there are many humans who are created these days by inserting sperm into a woman, or an egg, an actual oh God, I don't have the language for it right now.
There are lots of ways that babies can get made now.
Yes,
that don't necessarily involve the direct the direct old-fashioned way.
Exactly.
But
and
yeah.
And that is my own, I certainly have friends who've been on that journey, and so in my own, ignorance, I'm just calling myself out. I just want to clean that up with everyone and apologize for just take responsibility for misspeaking about that. So please, if you have any issues, just holler at me, okay? hello@igniteintimacy.com. And I love you, and I really, truly honor everyone's journey in the child making and desire to have a child process. So
good. Yeah. Good owning on that, by the way.
Thank you. So what I find fascinating is how it's not like you started with this vision of writing these books and teaching people about orgasm and female anatomy and all of these things. It was sort of just just absolutely this natural progression of your original work as a midwife.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And
yeah.
I love that. And I have so much love for midwives. I had a midwife when I birthed my daughter, and I had a natural birth, and it was the most powerful experience I've had to this day. And so I just really honor you and all of the midwives and doulas and support out there who are taking a stand and rooting for natural birth.
Oh gosh, yeah. So I didn't know that about you. So that just makes me just love you even more, because you were wise enough and courageous enough to really go against this cultural mainstream approach to birth, which is unfortunately really damaging energetically, not physically. Well, physically it can be too, because cesarean sections and all the stuff that can happen. But it damages our access to our power. And that's just what you were saying, that you had this powerful experience. And I'm not saying that if you don't have a vaginal birth, there's something wrong with you, or you can never get those experiences. There are lots of ways to do it, but it really behooves us to maximize our chances of having that.
Absolutely.
And I just want, I wound up in my planned home birth turned into a hospital cesarean.
Wow.
So, shit happens, right? And thank goodness, because my son would not have survived. And I know that that's true. However, most people who wind up with cesareans and are told that, it's actually not true. And it's because we screw up birth so very badly for most people. And in fact, the analogy that it is very helpful for people to think about when you're thinking about where to have a baby, think about where you would want to have sex, because you need to get into that trance state. And the same way you need to when you're getting turned on. And if you're in a strange place with fluorescent lights and strange people walking in the room and asking you questions and sticking their hands in your crotch and just creating this environment where it would be pretty hard to get turned on and have an orgasm, it's not surprising that so many women don't get the birth experiences they could have. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of women feel bad about themselves. They feel like they failed or their body didn't work. And it's like, no, your body would have worked fine if you'd been in a different environment.
Yes.
If you were surrounded by people who understood the erotic nature of labor and birth, who understood how to help you get into your trance and created that safety and container for you, which is why midwives are, generally speaking, often a better bet, because most midwives, or many midwives, are really have much more of that sensibility than doctors do. Just saying.
Yes, totally. And if you want a resource, Spiritual Midwifery was a book that I read when I was 19 and pregnant with my daughter, and it was a very, very powerful read on home births and midwifery at this farm in Tennessee. So this kind of leads us into the conversation.
I just have to tell you, in my office, I've been renovating it and things are getting moved around, and I just found my own original copy of that book.
Wow.
That I also first read when I was about 13.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and I know we're so aligned. This is awesome, and I feel like this is a great lead into the conversation about boundaries, because it's like with regards to birth, you're in such a vulnerable position, right? Mm-hmm. And if you, and it's so, I'm just like seeing the correlation between birth and sex. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the right people in the room, mm-hmm. if you are not in your power, if you don't have the right, like partner, if, for you, and you're choosing consciously, things can get very wacky very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, we are so vulnerable at that point. And very much like sex, it's also a vulnerable experience. And so for any of these things, it's, relationships, and it's work as well, not just birth or sex, but I think just to get back to the boundaries issue, which was where we wanted to start, we wound up going off into birth, is because we don't actually have good training in boundary skills.
Yep.
And that would come in handy for every aspect of our life.
Yes, absolutely. And for myself, I know I didn't really have great role models for setting boundaries.
Yeah, like none.
Yeah, there were like none, totally. And none. when I tried to say no to things, it was like, no, you can't say no. Yeah. We're going to do it anyways, or
and
go to your room.
It goes back to being a kid. I still remember I didn't want to kiss like this old great aunt when I was maybe 3 or something. And I was like, no, I don't want to kiss her because, old and smelled funny. And I just wasn't, I was 3. And I got so shamed for that.
Oh, yeah.
instead of an adult going, that's okay. It's your body, and you don't have to kiss anyone you don't want to kiss. And here might be a way that you can say that would be, a nicer way to say it. But yeah, I mean, just right from the beginning, we don't respect the boundaries of children.
Yep. I had a very, very similar line in my family where, you were required to
Mm-hmm.
go and hug and kiss all the aunties and uncles and even the ones that felt really creepy. And,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't matter. And what's powerful is my daughter was like, you know what? No, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to do that. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, wow, okay.
Good. Right?
Awesome.
Because how are we going to have good boundaries around sexuality and relationships and those interactions if we never learned them? We didn't
That's right.
grow up in a culture that emphasizes them. And so, sure, we're going to wind up doing things where we feel uncomfortable, where we have an inner voice going like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but we don't know what to say or how to say it. We don't want to hurt their feelings. And, go through all this rigmarole around it because we never learned the skills of boundaries. And that's what boundaries are, skill sets, learnable skill sets.
So boundaries can go out the window when you're turned on. Right? So so how do you maintain powerful boundaries with erotic encounters? Like what are the tools? What are the tricks? What should we look out for in this situation?
Well, that is an excellent question. So I'm going to answer that briefly, but then I want us to talk about that process and kind of come back to this. So this might be kind of a long answer, but sex makes us stupid. Right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, it does, because who hasn't had that experience of waking up the morning after and going, I can't believe I was so stupid. What was I thinking? Well, you weren't thinking because your brain was turned off. Your body turns on, your brain turns off. So knowing that that's going to happen, that's why we need the boundary skills, because that way we can prepare for stupid and know how to manage our arousal. So if we need to actually turn that down, we can. So that's a whole skill set in itself. And I'll try to remember, we can come back to it. But let me just talk a little bit about that process, the boundary learning process, and recognize that if we practice this a lot in all areas of our lives, it becomes easier to do it in a sexual situation, in an intimate situation, and in a situation where we might not be firing on all cylinders because,
we're insane in
engine.
the membrane.
The what?
We're insane in the membrane for a moment.
Exactly. Good one. Yeah, exactly. So let's come back to that, but let's talk a little bit about the process that we can go through in order to figure these things out. Because the thing about boundaries is, it's not like you figure it out once and then that's it. This is a process that you go through in an ongoing basis in many different situations. So even if you're in an ongoing relationship with an intimate sexual partner, there's still an ongoing dynamic around boundaries. In fact, in some ways, even more complicated ones. So, and we have boundaries with our family, we have boundaries at work, and we have boundaries with our kids, right? Okay, so learning how to manage our boundaries is something that we can do everywhere. And of course, the more we practice, the better we get at it. So when we're in a high risk, charged or fraught situation like a sexual encounter, we're going to do a lot better if we've been practicing it. So the first step in this process is to know yourself, to understand that we've got different wisdom centers that we can check in with. You can think of it as being the chakras. That's the model I use. Or you could think of it as, sort of 7 different parts of yourself or 7 different subpersonalities. But if we use the chakra model, so you're in a sexual situation, your genitals, your sex center is going, yes, let's do it. And if that's all you're listening to, you're going to wind up in situations that afterwards you're going to think I was so stupid, or why did I do that? Or I broke a relationship agreement, or I didn't use, risk reduction, or I risked pregnancy, whatever, right? All those stupid things we do. Okay, so the first thing is to know we've got these 7 different ways to check in with ourselves. So if we start from the root chakra, that's our safety center. And we can actually kind of check in and go, does this feel safe? And safe can be physical or it could be relational or energetic. Does this feel safe? Does this situation feel safe? And you just kind of check in. Do I get like a yes, a no, a maybe, I'm not sure? Your genitals, that they're going to, be chiming in about like, yeah, this is sexy, this is juicy, let's do it. And if we're talking about a non-sexual situation, it's the question is more like, is this kind of feeding my creativity and my life juice, Then we can check in with our power center. Is this empowering? Is this an empowering choice to make to go for a yes in this, or would it be more empowering to say no? What's the power center got to tell me? Then we can check in with our heart. Is this in service to my self-love? Is this taking good care of my heart to do this thing, or would it be better for me and better for my heart to decline? We can check in with our voice, our throat chakra. Can I speak my truth? Do I feel like I'll be listened to? Do I feel like I can communicate around what's going on? And will that be respected? Can I trust the communication here? Then we can check in with the third eye, which I think of as both the intuition and the intellect. What does my smart brain tell me here? My brain might be going, yeah, you've done this before and it didn't really work out that well. Or my intuition might be going like, oh yeah, this is right, this is good, right? So check in with our how we know and our wisdom centers. And then the crown chakras are our spiritual centers. So, and some people won't relate to this, but if you do, it's sort of, is this in service to my spiritual path? Is this in alignment with my spiritual values, right? So there's different questions we can ask. And you can kind of check in with them all, and they're like traffic lights, right? You can get like a green light, a red light, or maybe a blinking yellow light. And then
proceed with caution,
or get more information, or take more time, or you can, I don't know is a valid answer to a question. Somebody wants to get with you in some way, you can check in and go, I don't know yet. I'm not clear yet. That's a totally valid answer. So, and we don't always need, all green lights to proceed, but we can then make a really informed decision. Now, that's only step 1, figuring out what your boundaries are in this situation with this other person, and then step 2 is communicating those boundaries. And we want our communication to be clear, and we want it to be congruent with our body language, right? Like if you're leaning in and pushing your boobs in someone's face and smiling, but going, no, I don't wanna, right? No, we're giving 2 different messages, right? So we want to be congruent. If it's a no, then be a no with your whole self. And don't play that little game of like, oh yeah, well, you've got to seduce me and coax me and I'm saying no, but I really mean yes. Don't play that game. Bad game. Yeah. Okay. So not
an empowering or powerful game.
Right. Plus it also, supports that whole mythology that some people might have, maybe more often men, about when women say no, they really mean yes.
Yep.
And right now, we don't want to support that.
That's right.
We want to, if we say no, we want to mean no. And if you're a yes, then say yes. Like
yes.
Just be honest. Then, all right, so that's being a good teacher of your boundaries, shining a light on the fence you put up so somebody doesn't go crashing through it, right? Right? Because you put up a fence in the dark and somebody goes over. Whose fault was that? Or whose responsibility is it? You put up the fence, you got to shine a light on it and say, here's the fence. This is the line. We can play right up to that line. That'll be fun, but we're not going over that line. Now, in a sexual encounter, once you set a boundary for that encounter, don't change it. This is one of the tricks of how to deal with the erotic energy. You could even say in the middle of it, I said, we could, have hand sex and oral sex, but we're not going to have intercourse. And now we're in the middle of playing and suddenly I've changed my mind. Let's fuck, right? Don't do that. You could say, you know what? Next time, I think I definitely want that on the agenda because now that we're into it, I'm thinking it would really be fun. But I set that boundary at the beginning and I'm going to stick with it. So don't be changing your boundaries in the middle, because in the middle, your genitals are yelling really loudly what they want, and the rest of your wisdom centers are not really not online to give you their input. So don't be changing in the middle.
Got it. Okay. Did you hear that, Ignite Intimacy community? Don't change your boundaries in the middle of a sexual encounter.
Yeah, just stick with your boundary. You can always have another encounter.
Yes.
Right? Okay. The next part is your yes or your no, your guardian or your gatekeeper, the part of you that if it's a yes, say yes, like a real yes. And if it's a no, give a clear no. And if somebody's being kind of insistent about it, you can get very sort of strong with your no. And if they still keep trying to barge into your temple, then you call in your warrior. And your warrior kicks their ass, right? The warrior takes over theirs. Somebody, after you've checked in with yourself and communicated clearly, you've given a clear and strong no, and they're still trying to get in, then you call in your warrior. And your warrior is like, no fucking way. You are not desecrating this temple.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if it is a yes, conversely, then you welcome them in with your lover. It's just like, come on into the temple, baby. We're gonna make some sacred pleasure here. So that's the process.
Great. I love that. Yeah, this is powerful. Whew. Okay. Yeah. And then so, it's like many times you can get into situations that you actually don't really want to be in when you're bringing the intimate, sexual, erotic into the mix. It's like, so getting really clear on what is a yes and what is a no is key. And could you just share with us for a minute what that might look like? Like, how do you get a clear yes? How do you get a clear no when there's so much swimming around inside of you?
Well, the more you practice this, the easier it gets.
Okay.
So there's that. So number one, practice it in your life. Practice it at work. Practice it with your family. Practice it in your imagination. Sit down with a friend and say, I'm trying to get good at this. Can you role play this with me?
Mm-hmm.
Practice the communication skills and strategies that are going to help you have that clear, congruent communication, because in the throes of the situation, you might not be able to think of what to say.
Yep.
So think about it beforehand. Practice the kinds of things that you might want to say. For example, you might want to say to somebody, I feel like there's a lot of sexual energy and attraction here. Am I reading that right? Is that what you're feeling? And instead of just playing this game where nobody talks about it, and they say, yeah, I am too. And they say, so I'm wondering if we could have a conversation about what we want to do about that. Wait, what? Have a conversation about if we want to be sexual in any way together. And then, let's have that conversation. And then I'd really like to talk about what would it mean to you if we were sexual? What are your intentions? What are your wants?
Yeah.
And here's my intentions, and here's what I want. And then say, I've found, for example, this is what I found for me, was that for me, having sex without an emotional connection, without some kind of caring connection, just didn't really work that well for me.
Yeah.
I figured that out after a really large number probably.
Oh, yeah.
Of encounters where afterwards I just didn't feel that good about it. And I started realizing I actually like to have sex. It doesn't have to be the love of my life, but it has to be somebody that I'd want to be friends with, or I'd want to have a caring connection, or even if it's a short term, even a one night encounter, that has to be somebody I can feel that I care about and cares about me, even in that context.
Yep, absolutely. And I've come to that same conclusion over the last several years. It's just for me, there's so little there. The connection has to be so powerful for me to engage with someone that I haven't had some time getting to know and building with on some level.
Exactly. Which brings us to another strategy, which is slow the fuck down. Why are we in such a hurry to connect with somebody and go all the way? Slow down. have dates where you cuddle, have dates where you make out, where you kiss, but keep your clothes on. And realize we can negotiate for different levels of erotic encounter. We could have hand sex, but not oral sex or genital to genital sex. Or we could decide oral sex is good also, but not genital contact. And we can say, this is what I'd like to do. Are you up for that? And can we both agree that we're going to hold that boundary, even if during the encounter we think we want to change our mind? And have these conversations. And then the last piece of it in terms of slowing down is also knowing when we're in that highly aroused state, we are stupid. Our computer-like brain has gone to sleep, and it's not a good time to judge or plan or process or have in-depth communication. So what happens when you're in a situation and you're really turned on is just be aware, oh, I'm really turned on, and that means I could be stupid. Stupid could happen now. So I'm going to turn my arousal down. Now, I've taught classes for decades now about how to turn your arousal up.
I love it.
Right? How do I get more turned on? How do I get more aroused, have more orgasms? And those are all wonderful things to learn. And the same skills can help us cool that energy down. Now, that's useful too, just in terms of better sex, because if we want to have more arousal, get deeper into our trance, we actually want to do is kind of heat it up and cool it down, and heat it up and cool it down, speed it up and slow it down, and be able to kind of dance with that energy. But those same skills can help us when we need to calm down so we can think. And so that might be, I used to remember having an encounter and realizing, holy cow, we have not had a conversation, right? We're on the couch. There's nobody else in the house. This is going, where when I was younger, it would have gone, and no conversation has happened, saying to the guy, we need to have a conversation, and I'm too turned on right now to have that conversation. I need you to not be touching me. I need you to sit like a foot away from me. And you sit there, and I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to do some nice, deep, slow breathing and pull my energy, sort of down and let that ebb a little bit. And then let's have this conversation before we do anything else. And so I had the awareness to recognize that I was too turned on to think and talk about it, and then stop what was happening and have that conversation. And of course, he was kept, trying to touch me. And I was like, I appreciate that you're feeling really turned on and you want to keep going. You want to keep touching me. And I need you to stop. So if you're not going to stop, I'm going to get up off the couch and I'm going to go sit in that chair all the way over there. And then we can calm down and have the conversation. And if not, then the date is over.
Yeah. And so talking about having this conversation and doing it in a way that doesn't dead the energy. Not that it's almost good that it brings the energy down a bit, but not killing it off completely.
Yes. And I think if the energy is really there, having that conversation isn't going to kill it. But there's also the situation where you are in an encounter that you want to be in, and you know where you're going in, but you want to communicate something isn't working for you at that moment.
Yeah.
For example. So we want in our skill set the ability to have sexy conversations and give feedback in ways that don't kill the energy. So again, these are all skill sets, being able to cool the energy down so we can think and communicate and talk and decide mutually where our agreed upon boundaries will be. And also during an encounter, say somebody is touching you in a way that isn't working for you. That could happen. It's been known to happen. And so, but we don't want to kill the energy. We don't want the person to feel criticized. We don't want them to feel like we're telling them what to do or that they're bad at it. Right? God forbid.
Yeah.
We don't want to make them feel bad about it. So how do we give feedback in a way that adds to the erotic energy? And and that is a difficult skill. And I will say that, again, I'll speak for myself, the more turned on I am, the harder that can be. Even after
Oh,
years of
yeah.
practice
Mm-hmm.
of doing this, I still have times where I don't do it well. I don't do it skillfully, or I get kind of stuck in my head thinking about what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? And then my own erotic energy has flagged at that point. So this is probably an ongoing life process how to do this.
Like all communication, right?
Yeah, but this is like especially hard because
Mm-hmm.
it's sex and
And
it's
you're so vulnerable. It's like, you're
and
like, yeah.
so is our partner, right? Feeling vulnerable, and we don't want to make them feel bad. Okay, so the an ideal way. So in the ideal encounter, say your partner is rubbing your thigh, and they're doing it like kind of like this fast rubbing, and it doesn't feel good. It isn't sensual, and so instead of going, oh, I don't like that, or don't do it that way, what we say is we start with a positive. I love that I love having my thighs touched. I love that you're touching my thigh.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a great area of my body to play with. Love that. And, I think, I think it would feel really even sexier if you did it really slowly. Would you like to try it that way? And then they do it slower, and you're like, oh yeah, that feels so good when you do it slow. Would you? Oh, I think it would really turn me on if you did it even slower. Try that. And then they do it even slower, and you're like, oh God, I love it that way. That is good. Right?
I love that.
Right. So there you had feedback, 2 iterations, in fact, of feedback in a way that revved up the energy, helped your partner feel good, and helped your partner learn something, which is, I don't like having my thighs rubbed really fast. That just doesn't feel, maybe they'll do it again, but, over time, if you keep doing it this way, they'll actually, you can even say, oh, keep that one in the repertoire, baby. That is good. I think that always works for me, that really slow, sensual thigh stroke. That's making me so hot, baby. Oh, right? So
yes.
This is how we learn how to be a great lover, to our partners, and have our partners be great lovers to us, be giving that kind of feedback. Because if we just settle, we're just like, oh, I'm just going to put up with that fast thigh rubbing thing that he does.
But not going to work.
Right? We're not going to like it. Then we're going to resent it because they haven't psychically figured out we don't like it. Or we just try with our body language to communicate it isn't working, and they don't get it, but they don't know why, and then they feel crappy, and yeah. So there we have it.
Oh, that was great.
That's the short version of the lifelong practice of figuring out how to erotically give feedback.
Wow, I love that. That is so powerful, and communication is everything. And so, sort of, segueing into women's anatomy, if we can just touch on this before we wrap up here.
You can touch it anytime you want.
Yes. It's right there. I have one. I am a female with anatomy. It's amazing.
So
I feel so lucky.
I know. It's great anatomy. It's all good anatomy. I'm not dissing any other version of
No, absolutely not. I just, I'm finally at a place in my life where I actually love being a female, Yes,
I do too. So here's the thing about female genitals. And this, and I'll actually start from Wayward, which is about how to help our partners be great lovers to us. And if we want them to learn how to give us amazing, awesome pleasure, there's a couple of things that we need to do. One is we need to learn about our own instrument, become good at playing that instrument solo. And our solo sex is really key to really learning how to play your instrument, and then teach our partners. Mm-hmm. And we can't really play our instrument well if we don't know about all the parts we have. So in a nutshell, women have just as much erectile tissue as men do. So erectile tissue is what gives the penis its amazing, dramatic, impressive ability to go from small and soft to big and hard. And we have just as much of that tissue as a penis owner does. So what the thing is, most of us don't know where all of it is. So we've got this network of structures all made out of erectile tissue. We know, generally speaking, at this point in time, about what people call the clitoris, which is actually just the head of the clitoris. The clitoris has three parts, but we've got other structures as well. We have what are called vestibular bulbs, which are two big wads of erectile tissue under the labia, one on either side, the top of which connects to the shaft of the clitoris, the bottom of which, where they get fat, either side of the vaginal opening. We have erectile tissue under the floor of the vagina in that wall between the vagina and the anal canal. And we have erectile tissue above the roof of the vagina, what people call the G spot, which is totally incorrect because Grafenberg didn't have one and it's not a spot. But it's a tube of erectile tissue that surrounds the tube of the urethra. And it's above the roof of the vagina.
Okay, can we pause there just for a second? Could you talk about this like sacred spot or G spot? Because there is so much around like G spot massage and, you know, like finding your G spot and all of that. So could you just expand on that a little bit?
I will. Let me get back to that let me just say one more thing about this network of erectile tissue. It's like a ring, a circuit of erectile tissue. And we can get turned on and have orgasms with just part of that network activated, which is what most of us are doing most of the time. But when you get all of the parts engorged, then you get this connected, interwoven, overlapping circuits of erectile tissue. And that's how we get to deeper arousal, more pleasure, bigger, better orgasm.
Okay.
So that being said, each of those structures deserves time, energy, and attention.
Of course they do.
They do. And it can take a while. I just want to say this as well, that for many women, 30 to 45 minutes to get totally turned on, your whole body turned on, your whole brain and neurochemistry turned on, and full engorgement of the genitals. So just putting out there that that's a normal amount of time to take. Not too long, normal, 30 to 45 minutes. Now, once the more external parts, the external structures are stimulated and engorged, because arousal for most women moves from outside to in. So you don't want to be playing with any of the more internal parts of the erectile network until all the outer ones are really big and juicy and puffy. So you've gotten the vestibular bulbs, big and puffy, and you've gotten the clit stimulated, all the different parts of it. You're at high level arousal in your state of consciousness. At that point, then when you go inside, you can play with the perineal sponge, which is under the floor, which is also a really significant spot, as well as what people call the G spot. But I don't, because I hate having body parts named after the men who discovered them. So the urethral sponge, that spongy erectile tissue above the roof. And these are deep and internal. And the sponge, the urethral sponge, my name that I got from the people I started learning about this from. When you're playing with that erectile tissue, it's a bridge between the two major nerve pathways to the genitals. And so it's deep, it's internal, it's playing with that deeper, more internal nerve pathway, which is also connected to the uterus and the more internal parts of the vagina and the deeper muscle layers, all of those things. And it's also connected to the more external major nerve pathway, which is where the clitoral structures are connected. And, and the skin and the more outer structures. And so that sponge is a very powerful erotic place to play with. But if you are stimulating it too soon, too early, it's just going to feel irritating, unpleasant, and maybe even sort of almost like a violation. Like why are you in there? It doesn't feel good. So it's at the appropriate time. Wow. And then last but not least, female ejaculation, that fluid comes from glands that are enmeshed in that erectile tissue. So there's another very deep, powerful kind of pleasurable and experience that can, when it is in conjunction with orgasm, really expand orgasm.
Wow. And okay, so I'm like, wow, there's a lot to explore in there.
Yes, there is. There is a lot. Isn't that fun?
It's so fun. I'm like,
Fun.
I want to see, because I'm such a visual learner. I'm like, I want to see a diagram.
Okay, so go to my website, intimateartscenter.com. Arts is plural, intimateartscenter.com. And I've got blog posts, I've got drawings, diagrams, which is also, by the way, my artwork. And the book, Women's Anatomy of Arousal, has drawings and diagrams, and I have online classes. And the online classes will give you the most in-depth information because that's like 4 sessions with color slides and overlays and fades, and it's me talking about it in great detail. So,
oh, yes.
Yeah. But if you just want the freebie, just go to the website, read the blog post.
Great.
Go a little step deeper, get the book. You want to go all the way, go for the online course. And they all really work well with each other as well.
That's wonderful. Okay, so let me just repeat that information. Award-winning book that Sheri wrote, Women's Anatomy of Arousal, Secret Maps to Buried Pleasure. I will have this in the show notes with a link. She also has another book. She has several books, but another book is Succulent Sexcraft, Your Hands-On Guide to Erotic Play and Practice. So we'll have links to Sheri's books in the show notes. And then also her website, intimateartscenter.com. Intimateartscenter.com. We'll have that link in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
And so before we sign off, is it possible for any woman to squirt? Is that
Yes.
something? Okay.
It's a learnable skill. Just like any woman can learn to have orgasms, can learn to have multi-orgasms, mega-orgasms, orgasms from different kinds of stimulation, and can learn to ejaculate. You don't have to learn any of those things. Nothing is required. But if you want to learn, you can.
Sure. If you want to deepen your pleasure.
Yeah.
Then, it's possible. It is possible. Well, Sheri, we have certainly dove in and through and out on the levels and layers of phases. And this has been a really juicy conversation and powerful. I'm so appreciative of everything that you shared with us today, and just so grateful that we got to connect.
I am too. I've really enjoyed talking to you. This has been great, and I think your listeners are gonna really not only enjoy this conversation, but I'm looking forward to hearing more of the conversations you've had with other people.
Yes, absolutely, and I look forward to us hearing from our listeners who have either already read your work or studied your work, or who are going to, and to, hear about what's opening up for people. So Ignite Intimacy community, you can always holler at us, hello@igniteintimacy.com. We're all about, just creating space for us to all explore and be curious together in a good vibration where there's love and respect, and love for ourselves, respect for ourselves, and love for others, respect for others. So let's keep the good vibes going and growing. And, we love y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Share it with your friends and stay blessed. Ciao for now. Thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out at igniteintimacy.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review and a rating. It helps more people know about us. We love to hear from you. You can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions to hello@igniteintimacy.com. And tell your friends. Music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Laura Aisha. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.